The first sign that Trump is beating Democrats on actual issues like the economy and crime is when they start their distraction and deflection routine. It's so obvious at this point, it's actually getting boring. They prefer to have Biden hunker in the bunker as they peddle stories that have zero effect on your daily lives.
John Bolton unleashing a torrent of criticism against his former boss.
Saying he is not okay for the American people.
Calling him, listen to these words, naive and dangerous.
A little more than 6,000 people showed up Saturday in Tulsa, far below the expectations.
The issue that drives the president more than anything else in these rallies, and that is the crowd size.
Why does he use racist phrases like the Kung flu? Are you saying the White House does not believe it is racist?
Now, Biden doesn't need, of course, to worry about his crowd sizes because he doesn't do rallies at all. Last week's Pennsylvania event wasn't even open to the public, but only to 20 local officials and small business owners handpicked by the campaign. That's convenient. And in the arena, though, the Trump campaign's magnetometer, of course, showed 12, not 6,000 in attendance, as was widely reported by the press. But regardless, an eye-popping 11.7 million people watched Trump's rally on TV and online. Trump gave Fox News its highest Saturday night ratings in network history. But the main point is, I think 20 years from now, no one's going to be writing about things like John Bolton's bitter neocon ramblings. No one's going to be writing about the specific crowd size at a single presidential rally. And no one's going to care what nicknames were given to a pandemic. But historians, if they're honest, will note how in 2020, Trump stood up to defend the greatness of America as roving bands of neo-Marxists ripped down historical markers in states and cities run by liberals. And they'll also report how the people had no vote on any of this, and how, as I predicted weeks ago, the destruction went far beyond the original Confederate targets.
Videos posted to social media show the moment Francis Scott Key was dragged to the ground. Key wrote the lyrics to the Star-Spangled Banner. He was also a slave owner. Protesters knocked down the statue of former President and Civil War General Ulysses S. Grant and the statue of Junipero Serra.
In an exclusive interview with Raymond Arroyo, President Trump was quick to point out what all the chaos-engulfed cities have in common.
Whether it's Chicago, it's Democrat. Seattle, it's Democrat. The state of Washington, it's Democrat. Portland, it's Democrat. All of these places are run by Democrats. 20 out of 20 are Democrat run. They don't know what they're doing. And if Biden got in, this country would be a disaster.
We'll have more from Raymond's exclusive interview with the president later on in the hour. But seriously, what Republican, when you really think about this, other than Trump, would have defied the media and defied even some local officials to be with his supporters? I think he did it to show people that life has to go on, that business, the business of America, must go on, and that the campaigning must go on. And of course, that we cannot stay hidden forever and separated from one another as the Democrats want. Now, just imagine a Republican like, let's say, Mitt Romney, if he were running. He'd be speaking to you from the comfort of home, muffled behind his mask and espousing cliches about alone together. Now imagine the enthralled dozens who would tune in for that. Now, better than anyone else on the political scene today, Trump knows how important it is to identify, frame, and win the current culture wars.
Leftist radicals in Portland, Oregon, ripped down a statue of George Washington and wrapped it in an American flag and set the American flag on fire. Democrat, all Democrat. Everything I tell you is Democrat. And you know, we ought to do something. We should have legislation that if somebody wants to burn the American flag and stomp on it, but just burn it, they go to jail for 1 year.
Well, he also properly defined Joe Biden for what he is, a figurehead. and a feeble one at that.
Joe Biden has surrendered to his party and to the left-wing mob. He has no control. Does anybody honestly think he controls these radical maniacs? Joe Biden is not the leader of his party. Joe Biden is a helpless puppet of the radical left.
Bingo. The Trump campaign seems to get it. This isn't an election between Trump and Biden. It's between Trump and the far left that's captured the Democrat Party. Finally, I think by merely showing up in Tulsa, Trump demonstrated that he's not going to be controlled by the COVID fearmongers. The media and his political opponents, they don't care about COVID infections. Give me a break, for if they did, they would have shut down the George Floyd protests in dozens and dozens of cities across America. But they didn't. And thus none of them should be taken seriously anymore on this topic. Period.